Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Weyburn City Council here this Monday, February 26th. There. Trying to still read without my glasses on here. So February 26th, we're going to begin the council meeting through kind of reflecting back on what we have progressed as we are moving into about the 18th month of this council. We have developed a lot of the what we want to accomplish and the why we want to accomplish this. So now with these years and months forward that we're going to work, we'll try to put together the how we're going to accomplish it. And this is what we challenge the council here to start coming up with the hows. How are we going to do these things and accomplish the goals that we wish to accomplish here through our tenure? The first thing that we want to do is look at what we have is that we have the approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting here held on February 12th. Do I have a motion, please?
Your Worship, I'll make a motion to accept those minutes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Call the question. All in favor? Tonight, I just want to make a note that Mr. Wheeler is away, and Louise is sitting in as our youth mayor, sitting there in his spot. And you can add in, if you have any comments or statements you wish to make, and in additions to the council, you just raise your hand, I'll recognize you and you can speak, all right? With that, we move for, speaking of additions, is there any addition to the agenda?
Yes, Your Worship, we have two. Item 10B, traffic bylaw update, and item 10C, water main break update.
10B is traffic bylaw, okay. Item C, water main.
Yes, that's correct.
And is there any other updates or any other things? With that, do you have a motion to accept?
I'll move that, Your Worship.
Do you have a second?
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Call the question. All in favor? So carried and unanimously. There are no public hearings and notices. We have no delegations, proclamations, or petitions, and there are no reports on standing committees. With that, we move forward to the consent agenda. Cash activity report. If we would, please. Can I have a motion?
Your Worship, I'd like to make a motion that the cash activity report for December 31st, 2017 be approved as presented.
I will second that motion, Your Worship.
Call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously. With that, we move to motions. We have the accounts payable. Do I have a motion, please?
Your Worship, I'd like to make a motion that the purchases in the amount of $1,413,670.49 from February 8, 2018 to February 22nd, 2018 be passed for payment.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Mr. Bailey? We then move forward to the next, which is the tender of the fire SUV. Mr. Hardy.
Thank you, Your Worship. There is supposed to be on 23 to 25, and lost my page here, Your Worship, all of a sudden. Thank you. No, I'm looking for the fire SUV. Matter? Okay, sorry. It's under, that's what threw me off. It wasn't under the Director of Emergency Services number. All right, so Your Worship, background is that tender was called for the supply of one four-wheel drive full-size SUV to be utilized by the fire department as a command and response vehicle. The 2018 fleet budget services contained $55,000 for this purchase. Originally, there was an intent to trade the current fire command vehicle, which is a 2010 Jeep. But recently there was a total loss from a motor vehicle collision. we have settled the claim with SGI, and these insurance funds will help offsetting the purchase of the new vehicle of $16,100. 4 bids were received from two local and 2 non-local firms. In reviewing the bid, there is council will be aware, there is a recommendation for the 2 vehicles did not meet the specs as were provided in the tender. 2 were found to meet those specifications. And the vehicle that's being put forward for council's approval is a tender for a 2018 Chevrolet Tahoe in the amount net cost including PST of $47,168.94. And the Barber Motors obviously meets all specifications, has a competitive warranty, and is the lowest price of those bids meeting specification. The report also goes on to say that there'll be additional cost about $4,000 to upfit this vehicle with response equipment, lighting, siren, as per emergency vehicle requirements by a third-party vendor. And there is a $200 option which has been put into the as a result of the tender being under budget. That is being submitted to council and for council's discussion and approval.
Do I have a resolution, please?
Yes, Your Worship, I'd like to move that the bid of Barber Motors in Weyburn to supply a 2018 Chev Tahoe CK 15706 in the amount of $47,168.94, including PST, be accepted.
Do I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Do we have discussion, please? Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just a question, and probably not fair to ask the city manager, but I'll ask him. There's a big discrepancy between these 2 prices, and I wonder if has one vehicle been overquoted? I guess is my only question, because between the two local dealerships, and I understand why the Durangos weren't included. They're not full-size units, and I can understand that. I'm just curious if anybody else found it odd that there was that much price discrepancy between the other 2.
Through your worship, just to answer the councillor's question as much as I can, we don't necessarily get into doing that type of comparison. I believe that in taking a look at, or we don't question why there is a difference with respect to the vehicles which the dealership has put forward to the city. So it's not, it's not normally within our purview to do any type of going further and beyond that, because the dealer actually has made the choice as to what he or she wants to put forward as a vehicle to meet the specifications.
Thank you.
Mr. Mambechu.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question for the chief, if he doesn't mind. Thank you, Chief. I'm of the opinion that I think we have a very, very, very tight budget, and I'm looking for dollars to save. Is there any possible way where we could do with not purchasing this vehicle this year? We have another vehicle that we might be able to use in place of it, or is that a possibility at all?
Obviously, we're without a vehicle right now, so we are without it. We are, okay? During this time we've been without a vehicle, we've had a gentleman that's had to go in, of course, and we've had to utilize the city vehicle, the SUV that's parked here. However, on a go-forward basis and in due diligence, we are short a vehicle, and we need a vehicle.
So the one that we purchased for the assistant fire chief, what does it get used for?
It's a 2008 2008 Dodge half-ton pickup truck, quad cab. It's used for shuttling equipment and personnel, as opposed to the command unit, which typically stays at the scene and forms a command unit, takes the commander there, usually myself, the pickup truck is needed. So for instance, when we had the last major fire, we had the Merglot fire, it was used constantly. Okay, we still had the Jeep at that time. Okay, should we have not have had the Jeep, that a personal vehicle would have had to been used. And then we'd run the risk of damage to that personal vehicle and things like that.
Any further questions? At that point in time, we'll call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Chief, for your explanation of what the purpose of the vehicle. We now move forward to the street sweeper tender, which again comes out of our fleet budget. What is, Mr. Hardy? You would, please?
Your Worship, basically there was a tender called for the supply of a single-engine street sweeper for infrastructure maintenance purposes. The 2018 Fleet Services budget was set at $235,000 after trade for this purchase, and a 2001 Road Wizard street sweeper was offered for sale. The tender was widely advertised, and there were 6 bids which were received from 5 suppliers. And that is sometimes can be when they feel that the specifications of 2 of their vehicles are able to be considered by the city, which is, gives us an option of looking at it. So the 6 bids were summarized, and of those 6 bids, there was 2 bids that did not meet the tender specifications, but their information was included in the report for council's information. There is a bid from Fermac Mark Equipment, which was recommended, which was the top recommendation of the staff reviewing the tenders. Although there were 2 other, there was another bid. Sorry, there was another recommendation, or there was another bid that was put in at a lower price, and basically the information is provided here for council's information, but primarily the city currently has a 2013 Global machine, and it had encountered some considerable issues. The supplier was not the supplier of that machine, and so they basically identified and took a look at the Fermark equipment tender, because in the past years we have purchased a number of city utility vehicles, including street sweepers, ice surfacing machines, Vector trucks, and refuse trucks from this company. They have been selling and servicing these street sweepers for many years. They use the Elgin the model being put forward has been utilized in the fleet successfully in Regina and Saskatoon, and they have indicated general satisfaction with the performance and service. So, in general, the recommendation of staff is based on the fact that post-purchase support and service can be invaluable, and coupled with the staff's familiarity with the Elgin brand, the recommendation is to award the tender to Fermark Equipment of Regina in the amount of $233,101.66, and a trade of a 2001 Road Wizard at the cost of $15,000.
Do you have a resolution, please?
Yes, Your Worship. I'll move that the bid of Fermac Equipment of Regina, Sask, for the supply of a single-engine street sweeper, an Elgin Pelican NP Tier 3 in the amount of $233,101.66, including PST, with trade of our 2001 Road Wizard valued at $15,000 be accepted.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Call the discussion. Mr. Richards.
Thanks, Your Worship, and I'm not sure who to direct my questions to on this. to a Director of Engineering. So, and kind of like Councillor Van Betz you mentioned in the last issue, we're pretty conscious right now about trying to make sure we've got all of the dollars, and I realize this has been budgeted for. When I see this like this, I'm profoundly shocked at the depreciation of these units, much like the pumper truck that we're going to be talking about in a few minutes, that purchased at $350,000 and 12 years later is worth $65,000, or a $235,000 street sweeper that, 15 or 16 years later is worth virtually nothing. And so my question is, are we in desperate need of a replacement, or is this regular sort of let's just get rid of it because it's time?
I have this conversation with Claude, our superintendent. He said that he's in an entire need for having this street sweeping machine. The one we have right now is the 2001, which we are offering trade, because I asked him about how about leaving it in the fleet and making it as a backup machine. He said it's in operational state right now. However, at any point of time, it could fail. So this is the situation, it's working, but it's not that good. So we need it.
This is 17 years old.
Yeah, no, I get that. And so, thank you. I just want to be sure, because that was my next question, is although it might be unreliable in the future, it won't be long before the next one's unreliable, and I'm not sure that there's much trade-in value in, but if he's considered that it's not worth keeping in the fleet, then we'd move it down the road?
Yeah,
okay.
That's what I asked him, and this will be some of the options we will do in the future. If we can keep a unit in the fleet and make it as a backup unit, if we need it, we will do this. If the depreciation value is too high like this in this instant.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Hardy.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just would generally add to the conversation, the discussion, that I think it's a valid question, of course, that is raised by the councillor, is that the normal amount of time which these machines, in my experience, have lasted or have been planned to be phased out is normally 10 years. So this one has gone well beyond sort of the normal time in terms of that amount of time being there. So it's at the point where it's becoming more of a liability than it's actually worth. And I think that's a good part that, in terms of our reports to council, that we identify what some of these general time frames are and have been, and then give an estimation of why we think we're in the position of either keep as a spare, or basically we're at the point where we need to because it is in the position of costing us so much. So even to know what the next major repair could be in terms of a cost, I think those are the types of things that the Director of Engineering is looking at in terms of being able to provide council with a higher level of comfort and information on in our reports.
One more issue here, we have to keep in mind, 16 years old unit, some of the parts, it may involve kind of problems finding it, or having backup or support for this kind of older units. So we have to keep this in mind while moving forward.
Mr. Mickle.
Thank you, Your Worship. Very good discussion on this topic. My comment would be, Your Worship, that what the people of this city need or request for street sweeping cannot be done by a 2001 machine. That if it breaks down, as you say, Nat, the parts are probably not in production anymore or unavailable. I think in the past we've watched this very closely, and we continue to do it with this present council. For what the people in Weyburn expect, and I support them totally on this, this is a wise purchase. And the other one, you know the other age of the other one, Natter, while we're talking? Do you know the year of the other one we have? Maybe it isn't fair to ask you that. Okay, that's beside the point, but I think I will support this purchase because the citizens of Weyburn deserve it.
Mr. Bailey?
Thank you. I guess when I look at the Raymax equipment sale, maybe I'm missing something here, but their net cost to income, $214,000. If I did my math right, it's about $18,000 cheaper. What am I missing here? Why are we going to the higher one? Other than the fact that we've dealt with the Regina company before, but.
I think they said that it was unreliable before. The other one, the other model was unreliable. They had issues with it.
They had
That's what
issues
you got
from
with-
the
that's what-
Calgary sale people?
Or no, the machine, that type of machine.
Same machine.
Is it the same machine? Go ahead, Nara.
We went with a higher bidder, because we have some issues with Remax equipment before, so for providing services for the units at the fleet. So this was one reason. Our crew did some research about similar units which is used, or similar services Remax is providing, and they got feedback from 2 municipalities in Alberta that they still have this issue for the timeline for providing the parts and the service. So this is the main reason, service-wise and providing the parts. As per my discussion with Claude, there is a lead time sometimes for some parts, more than 1 month for getting the parts in place and for having the service. The last reason for this, they don't have a service place in Regina, though they have provided us with a place where we can do some kind of service. After researching this option, we find that they don't have experienced people for doing this type of repairs for this unit. However, they can go and rent the place from them, and they can provide them with mechanics for doing the service, but it is not fully equipped for servicing this kind of machines.
That surprises me, but okay.
Any questions, Mr. Bambechu? No? Everything's good? Again, this comes out of our fleet budget, which is an ongoing rotating one to rotate and keep up our fleet. Totally out of the operating budget. Call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously. We then move on to tax enforcement. Mr. Hardy, or should I say Laura? Mr. Hardy.
Thank you. Your Worship, the report in front of Council just provides a listing of those properties that are in tax arrears for the year 2017, and we wish to move forward on this. So the recommendation of staff are to pursue these underpayments. And basically, the amount of these arrears, I'm going a bit from memory because the report here doesn't have it, but I know that one of the councillors has a recommendation, which is to move us forward in this process of dealing with tax arrears, and this is a report that summarizes the 2017 year-end property tax arrears.
Do you have a resolution, please?
Yes, Your Worship, I have a resolution. I also have that number if Council would like to know it. It's $352,412.18 that is in arrears. So knowing that, I'd like to make the motion that the tax enforcement arrears list for 2017 provided by the City Assessor be accepted as presented.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Discussion? Mr. Bambechu?
Yes, Your Worship. Laura, I was wondering how this compares to other years. I think, is it double? I wasn't sure in the wording on here, but.
No, I think it's about the same.
About the same? Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mickle.
Worship, I checked with the assessor, Teresa. Last year was 475,000.
Okay. So we're down a bit this year.
We're down a bit. Maybe the list is longer, but last year was 475.
So the resolution again reads?
Yes. I move that the tax enforcement arrears list for 2017 provided by the City Assessor be accepted as presented.
Call the question. All in favor? Carried. Our next is the fire engine sale, the offer to purchase. Fire Chief or Mr. Hardy, who wants to deliver this?
I'll introduce while the chief comes to the microphone to answer any questions.
Okay.
Your worship, the purpose of the report in front of council is to seek council's support in the approval of the sale of Engine 51D, namely a 2000 Freightliner Superior pumper truck. The background is provided from the chief in terms of what results he had as putting this up for a sale at a listed price of $65,000. And I will ask, the chief will be available to answer any questions related to the background on this report.
At this point in time, do we have a resolution?
Your worship, I'd like to make a motion that the offer of Delisle and District Fire Department to purchase the Engine 51-D fire truck in the amount of $65,000 from the City of Weyburn be accepted.
I'll second that, your worship.
Discussion? Any questions? Mr. Mickle.
Thank you, your worship. Maybe I'll ask Simon, but maybe I don't know if it's fair to you to answer this, Simon. The $65,000 that if we pass this motion, was that in the budget for 2018, or do we have a number?
We didn't have a number.
So
never.
This is actually found money?
It's just found money, Council.
I love
yes.
that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Van Betcher? Or Mr. Chessel first?
So I guess my question is whether it's Mr. Hardy, Mr. Ullman, what happens with that money then? Does it go towards the new fire truck? Does it go to general coffers, streetlights? If I may answer?
You can start.
Okay, start. When we sold the truck last year, or the year before, when we got the ladder truck, that money was used to offset the purchase of the new truck.
Mr. Hardy?
Thank you. When there is this kind of money that is unbudgeted, it is normal for council to look at what other projects are in that department's budget. But council does have the ability to direct those savings to go where it deems necessary.
Mr. Van Betcher?
Thank you, Your worship. I guess it just always puzzles me how this vehicle can't be used in Weyburn, but it can be used in Delisle.
Yeah, yes, through you, Your worship. It's just we deal with a 15-year lifespan. This vehicle has been pushed back to an 18-year lifespan. It obviously meets the needs for the city of Delisle or town of Delisle. How they choose to run their fire service and the risks that they take when older vehicles, it's beyond my control.
We see in other municipalities, and again, just to give the information, we see in the other municipalities, and especially when they start showing up north at Suma, where they showed some of the other different departments joining together and coming together and developing their fire plan. A lot of those vehicles were very, very old, looking on the films. And again, are they going to be reliable for what our citizens have the expectations for? And that's what it becomes the idea. Do we have the expectations? We don't need fire trucks breaking down on scene. Go ahead, Mr. Hardy.
Your worship, just to add to that, I mean, the issue is that in any of these cases, when it comes to providing information to council on these elements, we try to provide an assessment of what the elements are that go into these reports. And a lot of it does end up being an assessment of risk. And if council is apprised of the risk and wishes to take that choice, it can do that. But it does assume a risk. And so staff will always err on the side of doing their risk assessment and be in a position to provide council with its best advice in terms of what that risk is. And in this case, one of the things that the chief didn't mention in his discussion, but it has been mentioned in discussions before, is this has a direct impact on the cost of insurance to our ratepayers. If we are found to have older equipment that is not regularly replaced, and a standard, while it is an American standard, It is one that is generally accepted within the fire service. But again, if council is prepared to assume the risk on behalf of its ratepayers, and it has the ability to do that, there's no doubt.
Any further discussion? No further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? The vehicle is now sold. Better than an auction.
As is.
Yeah, as it. And that's the other thing too, is that this is being sold as is, where is. There is no warranty on this, correct, Chief? It is as is, where is, and we walk away from it. We're going on to introduction of bylaws. We have the bylaw 2018-3372, the pension plan transfer bylaw. Do we have a resolution, please? So we can open discussion. Who has the resolution?
I have the worship, but was the city manager going to give us a prelude?
You do read the resolution, and then he'll do the, so we can go into minutes.
Okay, your worship, prepare to make a motion that bylaw 2018-3372 to terminate the existing city pension plan and move all existing members to the municipal employees pension plan be read the first time.
Mr. Chesson?
I'll second that, your worship.
Discussion. Mr. Hardy, do you want to open, please?
Thank you, your worship. I'd be pleased to open. The bylaw which is in front of council this evening will move the City of Weyburn employees from, propose to move the City of Weyburn employees from the city pension plan to the MEP, which is the Provincial Municipal Employment Program, as of January 1st, 2019. This change is a result of several years' work started by the previous council and carried over to this term. Although the transfer costs will be finalized in 2019, the city will fund any upfront cost from existing reserves, as this transfer has been anticipated by city staff and by previous councils over a number of years. There will be no tax increase to pay the upfront costs of this transfer.
Discussion? Mr. Mickle? If there is no further discussion, call the question. All in favor? Carried. Second reading.
I'll make a motion, your worship, that bylaw 2018-3372, a bylaw to terminate the existing city pension plan and move all existing members to the municipal employees pension plan be read a second time.
I'll second that, your worship.
Discussion? No discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Moving forward. Mr. Mickle?
Thank you, your worship. Propose a motion that bylaw 2018-3372, a bylaw to terminate the existing city pension plan and moving all existing members to the municipal employees pension plan be given three readings at this meeting.
I'll second that, your worship.
Call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously.
Make a motion, your worship, that bylaw 2018-3372, a bylaw to terminate the existing city pension plan and move all existing members to the municipal employees pension plan be read a third time and passed.
I'll second that, your worship.
Call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously. With that, we move forward to, and that, there'll be some more discussion here in a few minutes. There's no unfinished business, which brings us to our new business, which is the pension transfer agreement. Mr. Hardy.
Thank you, your worship. As part of the process of moving the pension from the city of Weyburn, the former city of Weyburn, or the soon-to-be former city of Weyburn plan, there is a requirement that there are some amendments to be made to the existing Weyburn pension plan, which will ensure that the transfer can occur on the 1st of January in 2019. And so the information which has been provided requires us to pass a transfer to that basically to make an amendment to the plan to allow the transfer to occur.
I'll make a motion, Your Worship, that the city manager be authorized to sign the agreement between the City of Weyburn and the Municipal Employees Pension Commission to transfer all members to the Municipal Employee Pension Plan effective January 1st, 2019.
Do you have a second?
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Discussion? Mr. Bailey?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just for clarification to the public, we don't know the exact amount, but we're comfortable in doing this with the information that we have from the people we've met with several times now, that it is going to be in that ballpark area that we're comfortable with. And I forget the number, but it is a substantial amount of money. When we open the door to that, I always have some reservations whether we're leaving ourselves open to be plucked, I guess is a phrase you could use. I hope I'm assuming something that isn't going to happen.
Through you, Your Worship, the recipient pension plan is run by the Provincial Employment Pension Association, which is a Crown corporation. The city of the soon-to-be former city plan was one of the smallest employer pensions within the province of Saskatchewan. And one of the things that we're doing by moving it to MEP is we're ensuring that basically by becoming part of a larger pool, that we're ensuring that the city's costs will be mitigated as a result of joining this larger pool. And there is a process by which there is a valuation which is done when we know who is transferring on January the 1st, and those become part of our valuation report, which is provided to both parties, in other words, to the city and to MEP, who are going to be receiving those dollars, and it ends up being part of the reconciliation of accounts, so that MEP will take over those employees, including our current pensioners, in making sure that they get their monthly pension checks. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Roy. I am very comfortable with the changeover. And I'm very comfortable with what we see projected for the cost to the city and the benefits of it. There's no doubt that we're going the right direction here. We still have that number that it's going to cost us that I'm still going. Are we opening the doors to something unexpected that we've been told we should be in this ballpark range? And I think we've discussed that we're comfortable in that area, but I just, for the public to know that we thought it was going to happen a year ago, we thought it was going to happen this summer coming up, and now we're on to, so there's lots of delays in this, and just as long as it doesn't cost us an excessive amount more than what we predicted to cost in the first place.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Bailey. Totally understood. While the process it was my predecessors for the longest period of time, and I just come in to bat cleanup, it's still very much a circumstance where what we're doing is we are going to keep council apprised of those costs over this period of time as a result of some of these changes, some of which we've had no control over, and keep council apprised and then get direction from them on those.
I thank you. Like I say, I'm comfortable with it. It's just when we kind of have an open checkbook for them is what I'm not comfortable with. And I don't think it's an excessive, but, you know, that's what it is.
Mr. Van Bessen?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just kind of like to echo what has already been said, I guess. I think in the 6 years that I've been on council, I said we've been working on this, and it is a onerous task, to say the least. It's a long process. I think our previous staff or existing staff is doing a good job of managing it. There's so many things that are out of our control, but our city employees have a very good plan in that it's a defined benefit plan. By going into MEP, we are guaranteeing the security of this plan for all our existing employees and all those that are retired, which I think is a huge benefit to them. There is not a single employee, I think, that will be out a penny, if I'm correct, and I think we've made that commitment to them. And at the same time, we're protecting our city taxpayers going forward in that their costs just keep increasing. The city has been putting a lot of money into this plan the last number of years to keep it solvent. And being a defined benefit plan is going to get to the point where it's just going to be too high a risk. So I think there's no doubt that the cost is exorbitant, but in the long run, it'll be a lot less money for us over going forward in a number of years. So I totally support this.
We might add that Regina, they moved away from their own pension plan, went to MEP, is that correct? And that was, and their cost was exorbitant also, but they also realized that the chance and the risks simply outweighed, the cost outweighed the risks that they were going to have. And it was back to what you had said, Mr. Hardy. We could stay in this plan if we decided we wanted to share the risk, but the risk is just simply too high to our citizens that we're representing. Mr. Richards?
Well, I didn't really have a comment, but since you've given me the microphone, I'll give it. I had a great meeting with our junior mayor, Louise, on the weekend, and we talked about today's agenda, and we talked about a few of the things that were on the agenda. And actually, one of the things that really interested her was our pension plan. And one of the things that you said, Louise, which I would encourage you to say tonight if you feel the need to or the desire to, was that also the youth of our community deserve to know that going forward there's going to be a stable plan for all of the employees of the City of Weyburn, not just current employees, but future employees. So I thank you for your input.
Thank you. I think it's a great idea if the youth would be more involved, especially in this movement, because it does not only affect our parents, but also us, the future employees, or who would be affected by this pension plan. So we would just want to know the information on why this bylaw was moved forward in the first place, and how it affects our parents, and how, because we wanted that if our parents do have questions, they would be able to ask the youth councils on how these things work. And so we would just like to be further informed and involved on this pension plan.
And with that, we'll be able to provide through your youth representatives, and that will be able to provide you with more information that you can take back, and so you have a fuller understanding of what's going on this.
Thanks, Your Worship. I assured them that our city manager would love to spend evening upon evening explaining to them the intricacies of pension plans for them. So.
Mr. Mickle.
Thank you, Rich. I just want to tag on to some of the comments that Councillor Bambetu mentioned. Mel, I totally support what you say, and this has taken many years to come to a final conclusion. And I also have to say that the City of Weyburn has had money in reserves in order to do this project. If we didn't have reserves enough to cover this, this wouldn't be an issue in front of us this evening. So it's a long time coming, and it's time to move forward for we have great staff, Your Worship, and as Councillor Bambetu says, it's time to move forward with this. It's a long time coming, and I'm glad it's here. I'm glad it's done.
As I said, the Regina moved forward with their plan. You mentioned about money in reserves, but at the same time, Regina saw fit that they were going to move theirs forward, and they did an extensive loan, far out, 50-year loan, I believe is what it was mentioned to me, to cover this off, because they saw that the risks just simply were too great, and that's what we're looking at here. So when we start looking at this, we'll now call to call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously. We are now moving forward with inquiries announcements. Is there? Oh, pardon me. We have two more.
Two more additions.
We have the traffic bylaw update.
Thank you.
We have a memo that's been handed out to all the council members. And Louise, did you get one? Here, I'll give you mine. Here, please. We did a poll, and these are the results of the polls.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Our communications people went and basically to supplement information with respect to the public's feelings with respect to citywide speed limits, not only the general speed limit, but in terms of those that are adjacent to our playgrounds and to our schools. That basically this is an update on where we are with this. There were probably about 800 people that provided some information from 807 votes were cast, although we had this post had been read by over close to 5,000 people, which is quite a distance going out there. 800 decided to vote this morning, and generally the numbers were 617 in favor of changing the citywide speed limit to 50 kilometers an hour, and 190 in favor of leaving it. I'm gonna move over to another format which was used in asking at SurveyMonkey, and there were only 63 votes cast there, but they were 43 in favor of 50 kilometers per minute and per hour, and 20 in favor of 40 kilometers per hour. So there's some interesting pieces there. In the area of speed zones in the schools and playgrounds area, basically the poll asked for 3 different responses in terms of did they want to see a 30-kilometer-hour speed limit maintained in those areas. It moved to 40 kilometers. Or there was a third option, which was 30 kilometers an hour with time restrictions, as an example, from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. on a daily basis. And with respect to those numbers, again, very respectable numbers of 7,200 people had looked through this at this post. There were 743 votes with 520 in favor of the 30 kilometers with the time restrictions. And there are some comments, again, which councillors have, and some of the interesting comments that are there, councils may want to have some discussion or talk about those. And in the on the SurveyMonkey, which again had 64 votes, roughly half were in favor of the 30 kilometers an hour with time restrictions. So basically, while this is something that we're, is again just some piece of information, some grist for the discussion that council will have when we put together, come together with a draft bylaw for council to debate and decide upon. This is just again some information that where we have used some social media in a positive way, and we've got some feedback and some comments that councillors can weigh in making their decision.
Discussion, Mr. Van Bitchett.
Thank you. Thank you, City Manager Hardy. That's great information to have, and I'm just wondering, is there any way of reaching the citizens that do not have Facebook or Twitter or something like that? In that, I know when we've done surveys before, I've heard a number of people say, well, I don't have this or that, and
right.
So, but I'm not sure there is an easy way to do that.
Through your worship, to Councillor Van Bitchett, I mean, it's a good question, and I mean, part of talking about public participation is trying to make as available on as many channels as we use, because as you know, we probably have 6 channels, just 6 different ways of getting information from the public. First, you talk to your councillor. Second, you go to the City Hall counter and have a discussion. You telephone City Hall or a councillor. You email a City Hall or a councillor. Or there's the possibility of survey. All of these things are good, and they do enhance public participation. It's something that I think the city needs to look at, and part of what we have where we have a communications person is to start moving us out farther into that area of getting citizen participation. Not that the citizens vote on it unless they want a plebiscite on something, which they have the ability to do under the Cities Act, but generally they have the ability to input and to try and influence council and decision makers on where things go. And I think that what we're trying to do is, in talking with senior staff, I've been encouraging them to make sure that they try to ensure that they're using all of these 6 channels where they can. And so we need to put a little bit more thought into how we might do this more regularly. But that's a challenge that I'll give to our communications coordinator, and we can start working on those things.
Go ahead, Louise.
I would just like to offer information that the Youth Council may not be as active as now, but given the situation, we could also lend our help in order to reach those who are not able to access internet or websites, such as apartments for seniors. We could also go there to create a poll of ourselves and report back to the city mayor. And furthermore, these polls, although I'm sorry, but I didn't hear of them. And so I think these polls may be a bit biased by the adults. And whether or not the changes whether or not the results may or may not have changed, I think the Youth Council could also join in on this, and such as, for example, the speed zones in schools. Many voted as for the 30 kilometers with time restrictions. Many who voted that might be adults, and the students who are greatly affected by this didn't have a voice on that. So I would just like to put that out there on the table, that maybe.
What you mean by, like, the students who was affected doesn't have voice? If you have a Facebook, like, you can vote for it, so.
Yes, but I'm just saying that not many students go in the Weyburn site, and I was not informed of this too.
Your Worship, Nader, unfortunately, a lot of youth don't even have Facebook anymore. It's a 30, 40 plus generation now. It's
Yes.
more Snapchat, Instagram, everywhere else.
It's, I think the Youth Council could, this poll could be further expanded through Instagram, and such as where youth are highly active and where they create more.
Mr. Hardy?
Your Worship, I'd be more than happy to arrange for a meeting with the Youth Council with our communications coordinator to help out in that regard and make sure that we get that youth perspective.
Thank you. And that makes me feel very old, Mr. Chesney.
Don't feel bad, Your Worship.
Facebook is, you don't even Facebook. You don't even Facebook.
Yeah, Your Worship, I just
30 or 40 or
Sorry?
what, for this, options, which one address you more?
We'll do some work with them.
No, he was just asking, and you yourself, which one, as a youth, which one attracts you for the school zones? Which one, if you were to vote?
If I was to vote, I would go with the 40, but with time restrictions too.
Were you talking to her now?
Yeah.
I didn't say anything.
That's a sign
Mr. Bailey.
I think our young member here just told us that we're a bunch of older people.
But that is the part why that's why we have them on council here as a representative, so we can get inputs and as you said, Louise, that you are the future coming into it. As we make these bylaws, you'll be growing into these things, and you should have your input, and that's why we want you here, so that you do have your input into it. Mr. Van Betju.
Yes, that being said, I would just like to encourage all residents to contact councillors or the city or whomever, but get their voice heard, because this is a fairly important issue. It affects everybody in the community, and I think it's important that we do hear your voice.
The poll is still going to continue on for a while?
Yes, this was basically
An opening?
an update. I can work to see it continue.
Okay, to continue, and the poll is also, it is on Facebook, old people think, Facebook, it is also on Twitter, and it's
also on our website.
on our website too.
But as I said, the other option is for people to call in to talk to their counselors and make it known what they're doing by email, and make their interest, make it known to all those parties.
And then Louise, there tomorrow, have yourself or Landon talk to our city manager and get that going together.
See what we can do about Instagram and
such.
others. And
Snapchat.
Yes.
With go ahead, and the next one is what we want to look at is the water main update.
Yeah, generally, Your Worship, I just wanted to do a bit
Oh.
of that. I got it. Oh, Generally, Your Worship, I wanted to just provide a bit of an update to council with respect to the water main break that did have on 6th Avenue. And in a general sense, I just wanted to point out a couple of things. One, that is that obviously when these things occur, we basically, have had, as it was reported, we're generally free of the breaks that we were seeing, but then of course we mentioned it and it happened. But a 6-inch main water break is pretty substantial. And it is only substantial in terms of the cost that it is to repair. It's also costly in terms of the amount of water loss. And being a rather large main, there was quite a large amount of water which was lost in a very quick period of time before staff were able to basically cut it off and work and start to redig and basically get that done. In fact, there was basically about 20 hours of staff time that was put into this response. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank my staff for their response. It was timely. It demonstrates a commitment to the city. And, while we do from time to time have a little push and pull on some of our labor relations and those types of things, I think it certainly demonstrated the tenacity of staff in trying to keep the city functioning well, and basically to get those houses which were directly affected back on potable water as quickly as they could.
Any comments, discussion? Moving forward, then, we go to inquiries and announcements. Any inquiries and announcements of the council? I have a couple, three things here. Three things, actually. First off, Louise, direct to you. If you would be, I would suggest to you that you phone Mr. Kinchin's office. I see that it was on Facebook, so Seeing the Youth is on Facebook. Now, 842-9000 is the number if you want to write that down, 842-9000. And he had put out a notice that stated that if there was any youth groups, they have got federal money for some youth projects that are needed, and he was asking for any youth groups to contact their office and talk to them about that. So it would be good that you and Landon would go over and talk to Mr. Kinchin's office and make an appointment, talk to them, and see what's going on with that. The other one that I direct this to Nader is that your street lights, what are we sitting, how are we sitting there with that project?
So for the street light, I did the research, as I mentioned to the council in my email. Got a couple of options for the street lights for the council to select the design they are willing to commence with. Some costs associated with this project. So now the mass is like, we need to allocate, or we need to know whether there is enough budget for this year to start with this project. The problem with this kind of projects, we need a lead time for procuring the material, the decorative lights, posts, 10 to 12 weeks. So if we are going to do it this year, so better
sooner than later.
Yeah, than later.
Mr. Richards, comment? Any comments, councillors, towards this streetlight project? Do you see this as a priority? Mr. Mickle?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I think it is a priority. However, once we come up with the concrete facts, Nader, and it doesn't surprise me with those numbers that you shared with us, let's try to find it in our budget without taking anything out of surpluses or reserves to do the streetlights. I think from what we've seen in the past couple meetings, there's enough there we can find to make this happen this year as a priority without reflecting to reserves or surpluses.
And with that being said, Mr. McCall, I just want to bring up a point that when we first got into council, and it was only a couple months in, I believe, Laura, and you can correct me, which you most likely will have to correct me, but I remember that as we were finishing up the budget, it was stated that there was almost $400,000 worth of projects that were not completed at that time, and that was rolled back into whatever into an account. And so from there, we had $400,000 of uncompleted projects for the 1 year that simply was put right back. And that $400,000 can now be used towards the streetlights. Am I correct?
Usually if those projects are carried forward to the next year, the projects will be done the next year.
But I don't think I ever saw those projects ever being completed on that, so.
So that
but,
money, it would be in reserves right now,
Yeah, so that money could be, seeing that those are uncompleted and there's allocated money from past years, the money can be found in those projects for that. We then move forward to the other one is that water priorities, and it's been brought to my attention that there are some of the surrounding areas, and I call this to yourself again, Matter, that there's some of the surrounding areas, communities, they are having water issues. There are farms and rural residents that are wells have gone dry, and they are now turning towards Weyburn for their supply of water for both land, for both their houses and for their more alarming so for their livestock, and drawing on our water reserves. We know that we have 3 years of water within Nickel Lake when it is completely full, and now we are down to 2 years. If we do not get runoff, which we have very lack of snow, we could be into, council will have to start thinking about water restrictions, and city itself, there were times in the 80s where they simply didn't water the grass for about 3 years in a row at Jubilee Park, and it was completely green simply because we had to conserve our water and work for it. The question that I put towards you is that can you give us an amount of how much water is being drawn from our pumping station over here? And are we seeing a rise in usage of collecting, people getting water for, like you say, that some people's farms and that are going down? And if we're seeing this drastic rise in this, what is the cost per tank? How much per tank is it that they're being charged? Because again, that was brought up to me as I discussed this. Is the water that's getting in bulk over their pumping station equal to what we as the residents of the city of Weyburn are paying for our water rates? So is it fair that way? And if we have to start restricting that water over there, how would we go about doing it? I know that we're going to a card swipe, and that the card swipe hasn't been put in because the internet wiring couldn't be put in until the frost comes out of the ground. Again, waiting for that, but it will eventually be put in. Are we going to be able to restrict it by having, say, a card that's bought at City Hall and it can be used only being picked up, and then we can show that you are from this area? We like to be nice neighbors there and help people through, but at the same time, we have to watch our water for our residents of the city, which is our main priority, and be working in there. Comments?
You've asked the question.
Yeah, I know, but through yours, will you be able to bring that?
So we will be monitoring, the water pumping station consumption, and I will update the council if there is an issue happens. And yeah, typically for the internet, the fiber optics, it will be done it's a priority, in spring. So it is scheduled for.
And if you could just give us an update too of the water rates, what they're paying, what our water rates are at the pumping station. Are they equal to what the city residents are paying, or is it less? How much is it for a tank of water? For how many gallons or liters?
I will get you this information.
Okay, thank you. Any comments?
Let's hope for snow.
Yes, let's hope for snow on the weekend. If there's no more inquiries and announcements, then we go through notice of motion. There are no notice of motions at this point in time. No requests for clarification and no committee of whole. With that, that brings an end to our council meeting. I thank everyone for joining us here tonight, and I thank for all those that have attended here. I call this meeting adjourned.